Tokaido for his talk. So I'm just going to pop down here, let Mike do his talk, and then scoot around with the mic for questions afterwards. Go, Mike.
Good morning. Thank you for coming along. I hope you're all enjoying the conference so far. The very first line I had was, "I'm Mike." I didn't know I would be introduced, so thank you very much, Adam. I'm off script already. So I've actually had this idea of this talk today at Drupal South since I gave my talk at Drupal South in Auckland last year, which was a real privilege, and I really enjoyed the process. It's the first time I'd ever spoken at a conference, and I really wanted to do it again, but I didn't know what I was going to talk about, and I didn't know that until my Christmas holiday when I went to Japan. And this is a good segue into who has previously heard the word Tokaido, not in this context, but who knows what it means? Go on. Got it. Yep. It is an old highway between Tokyo and Osaka, and it is also now the name of the bullet train that runs from Tokyo to Osaka, the Tokaido Shinkansen, which is a wonderful train ride. It takes about 3 hours. It's very relaxing. You've got a big, wide open window, big, comfortable seat, and you can just sit there and look out the window and have a good time. Or, if you don't know how to have a holiday properly, you can do what I did and you can work on a problem. And it's a problem that we all have, and it's a problem that I think we've taken too long to try and solve. And Tokaido is really trying to solve that problem. So now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you, if you are a Drupal dev with any amount of experience, if you've been doing it for a day or for 10 years, can you put your hand up? If you would consider yourself a Drupal dev, fantastic. That is almost all of you. Keep your hands up, keep your hands up. You're ruining my bit. Now, put your hand down if you've been a Drupal developer for more than a year. Right, more than a year. There is one, two people, three people with a hand up. So we've gone from almost the whole room to, sorry, four. Almost, I feel like I'm doing an auction. Almost the whole room down to just 3 or 4 people. And that, to me, is alarming. Drupal adoption is stagnating, and if you look at some reports, it's falling. And I think if you look at this compared to other platforms that people can come to build a website, now obviously Drupal isn't the same thing as something like Angular or React, but if you were looking to be a developer or you were looking to switch toolkits and you wanted to look at something that somebody had told you about, going on to React or going on to Laravel is a much simpler process than going on to Drupal. I don't think I'm alone in feeling that. I've only been working with Drupal for 2 years, and when I first did it, I went to Drupal.org and I went, what are the install instructions? And it basically gave me the finger. It was 10 steps that were incredibly complicated. I'm a DevOps engineer, so I knew most of what I needed to do in that context, but if I didn't have that experience, I don't think that I could have overcome that process. It is terrifying. And this is a problem that we have. As I mentioned, this is the weekly project usage report for Drupal core. This is somewhat anecdotal, but I think it goes to amplify that. If you look at the orange line towards the bottom, that is the Drupal 8 adoption. The blue line at the top is the total adoption. And since about 2015, things have relatively stayed the same. The web has not stayed the same. The web is getting bigger, and Drupal is not a part of that journey. And I think, as I've alluded to, a big part of that is that it's not easy to get started if you're a new user. And even if you're an experienced developer, it's still not easy to work on Drupal if you get onto a new project. For those of you that are really senior Drupal devs, if I gave you a brand new laptop and said, clone a site that you're working on and get a local environment up and running in 30 minutes, who thinks they could do that? Okay. Who thinks they could do it within an hour? All right, some of you. Okay. So, and that wasn't very confident, I have to say. So Tokaido attempts to solve that problem, and I think by and large does solve that problem. It solves the problem that we need a command line interface that is fast, cross-platform, easy to use, open source, and supports not just basic configuration but advanced configuration. This is effectively, Tokaido's been in use for at least half a year. This is pretty much the grand unveiling. And that's what I was talking about when I mentioned that I was really looking forward to doing this talk, because this talk has always been the release into the wild of something that I've worked really hard on with a buddy of mine. And I hope this demo is okay. I'm going to show you the toc command. No, I'm not. Let me show you the toc command. I will actually show you that, then I'll go back to that. Right. So in this example, I'm going to show you two commands. One is called toc up. Toc up is what you want to use if you've got an existing Drupal site. It doesn't have to have ever been configured for Tokaido before. All I've done here with this demo site is do a composer create project of Drupal 8. Drupal 7 works with Tokaido as well, so long as it's on PHP 7.1. We don't ship 5.6 support. So I've got a repo that has a composer, the vendor directory is there. If I just run toc up, Tokaido will start, it'll scan the site. The first thing it'll do is go, you've got a Drupal 8 site. Do you want me to create a settings file so that I can connect to the Tokaido database, or do you want to do it manually? I'll say I want you to do it automatically. And it's going to create a Docker Compose file. It's going to sync between my Tokaido environment and my machine here. And then it's going to set up an SSL certificate so that I can access that site using a valid and trusted SSL certificate. While it does that magic in the background, I'm going to move over to another window, and I'm going to run many commands. I'm going to run toc new. So we're running toc up in the other window, we're running toc new here. This is if you are your first time Drupal user, or you just want to create a repository. It's the same sort of thing you do with Composer Create Project, but this does it all for you. So I'm going to run toc new. I'm going to say the project name is Hello Drupal South, and I'm going to say profile is demo umami, which is going to load the umami demo that comes default into Drupal. So this is largely the same process. It creates a Docker Compose file, and that's a good segue into exactly what this slide is talking about. This is a Tokaido environment. Each of these components on your right are Docker containers, and that's all Tokaido really does. The toc command is a orchestration tool for a series of Docker containers. Some of those Docker containers are the general Docker containers that you get. For example, the Memcache and MySQL containers are the official containers. Other containers are Tokaido specific, like the HA Proxy, Varnish, Nginx, and PHP containers are all built for Tokaido, and they're production grade. We actually run these containers in production. And it's going to create a production-like environment that includes things like, obviously, like the Varnish server. Varnish has caching built in, it's on, and it's available if your Drupal site has caching. So if you're going to find problems with caching, you won't have to wait until you see them in production. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. The units down the bottom, Solar, Mailhog, Admin, and Memcache, Redis isn't there, but it also is available, are add-on services that we can turn on if we want to. So how do we do that? Let me go back to the demo. Toc new is still running. Toc up is done. So that environment's running. That would have taken less than a minute. I probably should have started a timer or something to prove it. But I can do a couple of things now. The first thing I can do, and the first thing I have to do, is SSH into the Tokaido environment. An SSH profile has already been created for me. So if I just SSH demo.toc, a secure certificate has already been added. Secure key has already been added, and SSHing in just gets me straight into the environment. This environment includes Composer, Yarn, Ruby, Gulp, a whole bunch of tools that you would need for development. It is actually possible to develop Drupal without having Composer or PHP on your host if you're using Tokaido. Next step, I need to do the Drush site install. Again, database configuration settings have already been inputted automatically. I don't have to do anything else from this point. I did not prep this environment at all. If you download Tokaido, you can do exactly this thing with any of your existing projects. But be warned, your first toc up is going to cost you about 2 gig of data. So if you're on mobile broadband, I don't recommend doing it. If you're on conference Wi-Fi, try and stagger it out so they don't get mad at me. But once you've got that all cached, it's going to use the same thing for every Tokaido environment. And you can run multiple Tokaido environments on your system. If they're up, they're going to use about 300 meg of memory, up to about 600 if you've got things like Solar and Redis turned on. If they're off, they're not going to use anything. CPU usage is also really, really low. Mac is deciding to be slow today, but it will get there. What I'm going to do, once that site is up, I'm going to show you a few of the other commands that ship with toc. So we've seen toc new, we've seen toc up. There are other commands like toc config, toc purge, toc hash, toc exec, toc logs, toc ps, a whole suite of different commands that are just designed to make your life easier. And that all comes down to the overarching goal that we've had with Tokaido is to just get out of the fucking way. The tool sets that we get for managing Drupal environments are just too involved. You have to spend too much time learning them when all you really want to do is just build a website. So, my environment's up. I probably could have run drush status in there, but I can instead run toc exec drush status. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah, okay. All right, I'm going to restart toc new. I saw this once yesterday out of like 30 iterations where Composer just stopped responding and dragged the whole thing down. So I'll restart that. Here we go. All right, drush status is done. The next thing I probably want to do is open my site. Toc open will open the site in my default browser. Eventually. Come on, son. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Now's a really good time. Yes, thank you.
What's the difference between this and DDev and Lando? Good question.
Excellent question. All right. Lando, Docker for Drupal, Docker for Drupal. They use Docker, they're similar. What I found with things like Lando is that it's another tool that you have to go and learn before you can get going. The objective with Tokaido is that you don't have to really learn it, and you can learn it as you go. Other tools like Drupal VM are VM based. They're going to use 2 gig of memory at least. They're going to be slow. I actually tried, on our GitHub page there's an analysis of like Docker for Drupal, Lando and Tokaido and how they each stack up. I wanted to include Drupal VM in there because it's popular. I waited 45 minutes for my environment to come online and I still didn't have one. And that, to me, just felt like they're not in the same class. All right, so that's, Toc Open has opened my site, which is great. How about becoming an admin user? If I run Toc Open admin, that'll do a drush ULI on UID1. That's just a convenience function. If your site's production ready, you shouldn't be using UID1. If I go into reports and status report, I'm going to show you something now, which is how I might be able to modify this environment. On some tools, you might have to learn Ansible, you might have to learn bash scripting, you might have to do other things. On Tokaido, we have shipped a command line interface called toc config. This gives me a little interactive utility that I can use to monitor and to modify my environment. So as an example, I'm going to go to FPM settings and I'm going to say my memory limit. I don't know why I've got sound when I do that. Anyway, I'm going to change my memory limit to 512 meg. While I'm here, that's a lot of beeping. While I'm here, I'm going to go to services and I'm going to turn on Solar Search and I'm going to turn on PHP Adminer. And I'll just say exit and I will say toc rebuild. Tokaido is going to go ahead and tear down that environment and bring it back online with all of my new settings. And that is a good opportunity for us to have a look at toc new, which is frozen again. Delightful. Swear to God it worked. And I can prove it worked because I recorded it. All right, I'm going to scan through this really quickly. You can try this at home. Toc new, my live demo broke. Profile, demo umami, I could see the future. All right, so this goes through the process. You can see this whole process takes 5 minutes, but it's not all just taking 5 minutes. Here's the environment coming online itself after the Composer components are done. Here's the drush site install being run, the modules that we ship, like memcache and so on, that come with Tokaido being enabled, and then finally, Tokaido opens the demo umami site. So, it does work. The next thing along while I'm here is another utility called toc test. This is something that we put in just last week. When you run toc test on Drupal 8.6, Tokaido is going to go and configure the default night watch tests that come with Drupal. That is another process that I think pushes away new users. I think testing in Drupal is not where it should be in terms of adoption, and this attempts to resolve that by giving you a single command that you can just run and say toc test, and there you go. You have an environment up and running. These tests fail because they fail out of the box. And it's up to you to go and modify them, but the platform is there. And we're done there. So if I go back now to my TOC rebuild, which is finished. So this is my demo environment. I'm done showing new. If I go back onto my site and TOC open admin. Why are you slow? All right, I'm back in my admin environment. If I go back into my status report, I can see now I've got 512 meg of memory in my FPM instance. What about my Solar instance? TOC open Solar will give you my Solar instance. And my adminer instance, TOC open admin will give me the adminer instance. So my database name is MySQL, and all my credentials are just Tokaido, and there's my Drupal database. There's a whole bunch. I think I'm almost running out of time here. No, I'm okay. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of other commands that are available. As an example, TOC status will tell you if all your environment is running okay, Drupal's listening. That's a good little thing to try and spot problems. You asked a really good question about what is the differences between other tools and Tokaido. This is one of the main ones, which is this background sync process, which uses a tool called Unison, which is a very, very, very old Unix tool that you could think of as a bidirectional rsync. All of the other platforms that use Docker to host Drupal use a virtual disk. Point number one is that running as a virtual disk makes it incredibly difficult for the tool developer to go cross-platform, because it's a different adoption process for Windows, for Linux, and Mac. And Tokaido works on all three of these environments. Using Unison means that we basically create a file inside our Tokaido environment and it gets copied over back into our host environment and vice versa. We have put this through its paces in terms of performance, and it performs faster than a virtual disk in almost every case. The only thing that you might notice sometimes is, for example, if you run Composer installed and there's a large number of changes to be synced, it might be a couple of seconds behind. So going back, I had slides that I forgot about. That's the demo, which mostly worked. If you want it, it's available through Homebrew on Mac. There's a binary for Windows and Linux. All you have to do is brew tap IronStar.io/tap and then brew install Tokaido. Make sure you run brew upgrade Tokaido every couple of weeks because this is actively being developed. And on that note, if you want something that Tokaido doesn't do, please put in a feature request. We have been using this ourselves internally. We've been using it with a couple of partners and a couple of clients, and they've given us a lot of really good feedback. But as I mentioned in the beginning, this is the first sort of open excursion for Tokaido. And I know you guys are going to find things that you go, that's all right, but, and I encourage you to do so. So final points, it's free and open source, both the Tokaido CLI and the containers that Tokaido spawns. It is commercially supported. If you have a team and you want to use Tokaido, we can be engaged to do training and support and to build features specifically for you. As I mentioned, it's being actively developed, and we want feature requests and we want bug reports. And if you go to our GitHub page, please give us a star if you would like. You can find out more at tokaido.io. There's relatively comprehensive documentation in there. We are in the #Tokaido channel on Drupal Slack. And finally, github.com, IronStar.io, Tokaido is our GitHub repository, and you should find a copy of the source code in there. So thank you. I'm Mike Richardson. I'm from IronStar, and we created Tokaido.
Thanks so much, Mike. Do we have questions? I'll whip around with this mic.
I don't know if I should be more or less nervous now.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. My question about the Docker compose, or what does it actually produce underneath? Because other tools like DDEV or Lando, it actually generates its own Docker compose YAML file. So the question more is, can I use my own with this one?
Excellent question.
Thank you.
So this is the Docker Compose file that Tokaido generates. You'll note at the beginning here, these first two lines, do not modify this file. Every time you run tock up, every time you run a bunch of Tokaido functions, it will regenerate this file from your Tokaido config. Everything is in here. This is the brains of it. But there is a flag under top config where you can say Tokaido project settings, use custom compose file. If you turn that on, it will stop modifying that file. You can use Tokaido for the convenience functions like toc exec, toc up, toc stop, and toc destroy, but it will, if you want to change the config, you've got to do that manually. There is also I love that sound. If you go into this .toc directory that Tokaido creates, there's a config.yaml file in there that you can modify directly, and you can actually, there's a middle waypoint where you might say, I want to use a different image for this container. I want to use a different version of Nginx, for example, or I want to use a different version of Varnish. You can actually go down to this services level, and you can say, right, I want memcache enabled true, and I want image my custom image latest, and that will let you use your own memcache image. So that power is in there. I don't think we've had anyone who's really used that feature in anger yet, though. So let me know if you find a bug. Cool. All right.
I love that you have a enable emoji configuration. I have that on all the time.
It's on by default. It has to be turned off for Windows. Very sadly.
Hey Mike, this is awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
I'm interested about if you've got an existing project and you've got database files, things that you need in order to do local dev.
Yep.
What's the workflow look like?
It should be the same workflow that I think most people use, which is there is no Drupal console in this yet, so it's Drush. You can use your Drush SQL Sync and your Drush rsync. Your SSH agent from your host will be forwarded into the SSH container. So if you SSH, demo.toc, Drush SQL Sync, production to local, you shouldn't do that. Staging to local, then it will do that as it always does. The only caveat is that we don't use Drush aliases from your home directory. It's the only officially supported method now is the only officially supported method for Drush, which is in your repositories /drush/sites folder. That's the way it's supposed to be, so that's the way that we've adopted. Any other questions?
Can I use WordPress with this?
No. No. I would love to. We want to bring this to other platforms, but at this point it's very specifically built for Drupal. Yeah.
Can you use a custom build of Drupal, like GovCMS 8 or something?
Yes, yep, absolutely. We've got people on the team that use GovCMS. We've got people on the team that use 7, 8, Lightning, all of it. So long as it runs PHP 7.1, I haven't yet found a site that just won't work on Tokaido. Oh, there's a, yeah.
How does it support multi-sites?
Excellent question. Without going into too much detail, it can support multi-sites. The provisioning tools that do things like give you the DNS entry and stuff like that, the way it all works is that anything star.local.tokaido.io will point to your machine. So if you create a site, say you've got main.demo.local.tokaido.io, and then you create another site that's called subsite. That should simply work out of the box because all of that domain's going to resolve to your host.
What about with the databases?
You'll have to do that manually. So there's a file called settings.toc.php that Tokaido creates in default. You can basically just copy that file out and put it in your microsites. Yeah.
Probably one more question, then we have to switch over.
There's got to be one more.
I've got a question.
Cool.
Just a question of what about the systems that do not support host volume mounting? It's like Circle CI, right?
We don't do host volume mounting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was this Unison?
Yeah. So Unison it's bidirectional rsync, effectively. It will copy the file from, I'll give you an example. There are no, in this file, there are no, I'll open the Docker Compose file. In this Docker Compose file, there are no host volume mounts anywhere. The Unison container, which is listening here on a TCP port, will basically accept any incoming connection from a Unison client. So we create a background service that runs the Unison client on your host, and if you change a file here, for example...
Can you disable that? can you disable creating a unit supply?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. You can disable creating the background service. You can see that in Tok config, but you still have to run Tok watch to have a foreground sync service.
Does that mean static assets take up twice as much disk space?
Yes. Yeah. It means everything takes up twice as much disk space. Yeah. We do have a global composer cache, however. So all of your composer assets inside Tokaido are shared with other Tokaido environments.
Great stuff. All right. Mike, this is
Thanks.